Hello, everyone. My name is Al Myers, and I serve as the Safe Harbor Coordinator and CSEC Presenter. CSEC stands for the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children, for Connecting Communities in Action for Cattaraugus County. And it's a privilege just to spend a few moments with you through this video, just to kind of quickly talk about how trauma bonds are formed between the survivors that are in that lifestyle and the perpetrators or traffickers that children and youth come in contact with. And so if you just take a few minutes to listen, I think this might kind of be an eye-opener for some of you, just to recognize how those bonds are formed. Now, back when I was in high school, we were familiarized with the idea of a Stockholm syndrome, where someone could be in relationship with another and create this kind of sense of dependency, or now we call or refer to as codependency, that they can't live without them or what they provide. And so trauma bonds are formed in people when there is a back and forth kind of reward and punishment type of relationship. And so in many cases, trafficked youth, they form this trauma bond with their perpetrator or other youth that they're actually exploited with. And these relationships tend to mirror the power and control dynamic that is often found in intimate partner or domestic violence. So if formed, these trauma bonds can be the biggest obstacles in someone's recovery. So how do you ask, or you may ask, how are these bonds formed? Well, there's kind of three components to them. The first is that alternating violence and kindness. There's a sense of a lack of isolation or lack of connection, kind of as a manipulative tool in order to get people to say what they normally wouldn't say or do what they normally wouldn't do. And then there's the last, which is the shame and stigma and fear of what has already happened, and capitalizes on the person's self-worth to kind of keep control over them, or to have a thumb over them that implements the fraud and coercion styles of trafficking. So when we talk about alternating violence and kindness, this is that reward and punishment type of relationship that, if I scratch your back, you will scratch mine. And this is that ongoing cycle of abuse, which there is this intermittent back and forth reinforcement of reward and punishment. And it does create powerful emotional bonds that are simply resistant to change. So sometimes if we wonder why someone just doesn't get out of that lifestyle and make that choice, it's because they're getting their needs met, and they're finding some kind of a semblance of being in that dynamic, in that relationship. And as many of you might be aware, it's a lot easier to put up with a monster that you know rather than the arena of life that is unfamiliar and unknown. The other piece to this is the isolation and lack of connection. And this is simply the way that a trafficker or a perpetrator or abuser will kind of create disconnect from family, from jobs, from friends that might actually send the message opposite of what the controller or abuser wants to take place over that particular person, that trafficked youth. And so they look to move far away. They don't allow them to attend community groups or get involved with churches or anything that might jeopardize their ability to hold on to that dependency or the codependency for that. The last piece to that is the shame, stigma, and fear. And this is pretty huge when you stop to think about it. But these trauma bonds are formed through and reinforced by isolation, stigma, and shame. And I'm certain probably that some of you who are watching this video certainly know the overwhelming burden that shame can put on someone. The trafficker may say things like, well, who's going to like you now after what you've done? Or, I'm the only one that loves you. You know that I'm the only one that could ever care for you or cares about you, which is why we got together in the first place. And this only goes to show that it increases the youth's feelings of isolation and lack of connections. It's simply put that the survivor doesn't know what to expect next. The perpetrator and trafficker keeps them on their toes through this. So what is the solution? Well, when someone experiences trauma and they have formed trauma bonds, it's actually a wiring in the brain, an architecture of the brain, if you will. And the way to counteract that is to learn about trauma, become trauma informed, and understand how the fight or flight response or freeze response comes from the amygdala and often leads them to live in that fear and isolation and the dangerous world that they currently live in. To break away from that is to rewire the brain, to find ways of grounding, whether it is bilateral stimulation, tapping of the arms, deep belly breathing, or mental gymnastics and acuity to reshape the wiring in the brain, to begin to allow those trauma bonds to dissolve and make healthy connections, getting people involved with community and others that can speak truth and develop belonging and attachment to that particular young person. So I hope you'll join me in this movement. May your mind continue to be sharpened and your heart becoming more to be aware, because the more you know, the more you see.